Hello,
Excellent.
everybody. Dennis Young here. This is series two of my podcast series, and I have a very special guest today, Bill Bahlman, who I know a very long time, who DJ, well known in that whole 80s circuit and everything going on. So, Bill, thank you for coming on.
Sure, I'm delighted to be with you, Dennis.
Fantastic.
I,
So
I,
let's
I I've been following your YouTube postings, and they're terrific. They're amazing.
thank you. And we're hoping for more great guests ahead. And I think you have so much, we're gonna do a two-part series on you, maybe three parts, who knows? We'll see how it goes. But,
Two
but
parts should do it.
okay. So anyway, let's find out about you, Bill. What were your influences, younger and artists, and what got you into all this DJing, etc.?
Well, I started listening to music at a very early age. My mother and my aunt used to sing to me when I was in the crib, and so I always had lots of music in the house, and it was interesting. It was my parents were influenced, my mother in particular, by Ella Fitzgerald and
Hmm.
Peggy Lee and Nat King Cole and a lot of those singers from the 40s and 50s. And she used to sing me all those songs.
How about that?
And and my aunt Dagny used to sing two-part harmony with my mom.
Oh,
So
how about that?
I I, I think they were training my ear without even knowing it.
Yeah.
And my mom used to joke with me that, like, when I was a little older, she said, like, I was always saying, no, you got the words wrong. They're really
That's funny.
correcting her. It's like, which is pretty amazing if I was like
Wow.
8 or 9 years old, knowing the lyrics that well. But yeah, early influences. I mean, the variety TV was very popular back in the early 50s and early 60s, through the early 60s. People like Dean Martin and Nat
Oh
King Cole
yeah.
had a show. Ella Fitzgerald did shows. Barbara Streisand started doing specials. Judy Garland was doing stuff. So I was
Right.
exposed to the Great American
You
Soundbook very
were.
early on in my life.
And then plus the soundtracks, the television shows. Everybody knew the songs from those shows. You know.
And the commercials too.
Right. Oh yeah, the commercials. That was amazing. It was the golden era of television.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's that much variety TV these days. Probably is very little, at least in the United States.
Right.
So having that exposure and being able to discern between the uh, really great storytellers like Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole. And of course, Ella Fitzgerald was so glamorous back in the
Oh
day
yeah.
and had an amazing voice. Uh, and then being able to discern the difference between people like that and people like Perry Como and Pat Boone, who were kind of, you know, not as legit in my mind,
Right.
So even though they could sing, they were a little bit more mainstream. Not that Ella wasn't mainstream in a lot of ways; she was very popular.
But I think back then too, all these artists could sing, they could dance, they could act. It was quite an era of you had to do a lot of things and to be successful, and even Hollywood or music, whatever you were doing a lot of different things. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
not like now where you could just be a singer on online and try to make it.
yeah. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in an
Okay.
area called Sunset Park, which was all Scandinavian as a kid. And so I was quickly breaking the rules in terms of, like, having friends who were people of color, black friends and Latin Hispanic friends and
How
whatever,
about
and
that?
bringing them to the co-op apartment building where I grew up. And like,
Oh,
that was, my parents were fine with that, but the rest of the neighbors, I'm sure I kind of tweaked their, like,
what's going
tolerance.
on, right?
Yeah, yeah, and my mom was, she served on the co-op board. There were 44 apartments in that building,
Holy
and they
smokes!
had a
Right.
they had a system back then of keeping the neighborhood all Scandinavian. which I thought was kind of effed up.
I'm sure it was.
But my mom fought against it. They had a system that they called blackballing, which,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And so we broke all the rules as a family, and which was great.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was able to see that Scandinavian people could be really great people. They could be really awful people. So I was like,
Hmm.
what makes us so special? Is like,
Right.
you could be just as crazy Scandinavian as anything else, or just as wonderful. So, but my parents really believed in uh, musical training,
That's
and
it's great.
from from an from an early age, I had violin lessons.
Hmm.
Starting when I was in the third grade, I had a private violin teacher.
Oh, wow. Didn't know
My
that.
parents, yeah, my parents were not rich. They struggled to survive, and both my mother and father both worked, and
Hmm.
took in work. My mother to help supplement my father's income. He worked for the National Biscuit Company,
How
which was
about that?
which was
Oh,
located in the Chelsea Market, which is now Chelsea Market.
oh, okay.
So we always had plenty of Oreos and Launer Dunes and
Oh, that's
vanilla
funny.
wafers and all that stuff in the house, because he was a baker.
Oh,
And
okay.
my mother, she took in work writing. And my mother took in work addressing envelopes by hand, to
Oh,
help
wow.
raise extra money. And then when me and my brother started going to school, she be, she became a school aide, so she could watch over us all the more, you know.
Okay.
But so anyway, they had me take violin lessons, which Professor Esposito was his name. I
How
still
about
remember him,
that?
and I think they were once a week or thereabouts. Yeah, and
Uh,
so right away from the third grade, I was playing in the school orchestras.
oh, how about that? Was your brother also playing? Was he also musician? Your brother Ed? Did he?
Uh, I don't remember. Yeah, I my brother's Ed. He- I don't think he took lessons.
Okay.
But by the time I was in the third grade. He was 2 years ahead of me.
Oh, okay.
Uh, by the by the time I was in the so the third grade, I started violin
Berlin.
lessons and
Okay.
started
Go ahead.
playing in the school orchestra. And
Wow.
then by the time I reached sixth grade, I begged my parents to get me a guitar,
Okay.
because I was like, violin was great and I was enjoying that, but like, guitars were cool.
Yeah. Right. Of course. And who were you listening to on guitar back then in grammar school? Was Elvis Presley,
Let's see.
Beatles, Stones?
I I was born in December 1951, so started going to school like late 50s. Uh,
Okay.
so or actually maybe mid 50s, because like, having my birthday at the end of December always made the youngest kid in the class.
Okay.
And but so I was listening to, everything from the Supremes, the OJs,
Mm.
the Ohio Players, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, uh, and Dion. Uh, I remember and I was already buying my own records when I was like 10 years old or whatever.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
like,
How about that?
yeah, go to a music store where they sold sheet music and music. I mean, record stores back in the early 60s were very different than what they are today. Well, a lot of
I'm
people buy their
sure.
music online, or listen online,
Right,
or have a
right.
music subscription online. But some of the early record stores were like, uh, they also sold washing machines and dryers and
Oh, how
things
about
like
that?
that.
That's funny.
So so it was music, and they had a record section as well.
I
You
remember
know,
like Two Guys, EJ Corvettes, those kind of stores. You're right. They had always had a record section.
yeah, and I remember like I bought so I was collecting 7-inch singles from an early point in my life. A lot of them I still have,
Oh
and
wow.
I remember I bought a single by Dion, and the song was called Wanderer.
Okay.
And I don't know if, yeah, I don't know if you know that
Oh, I
song.
think I've heard it. Right. I've heard that.
Yeah, but it was kind of like, about someone who was going from girl to girl, from place to place. I'm a
Mm,
wanderer, and like, it was interesting. My parents would let me listen to the song, but
right.
they crossed out the title of the record on my 7-inch single.
Oh, that's interesting. Ah,
So it wasn't banned in my house, but
right.
like the title was banned.
Ah, that's funny. Oh my gosh. Oh, you had
Yeah,
the big 50s back then, the Chuck Berrys of the world and Bo
yeah.
Diddley and all those Little Richard. I mean, that was really an explosion of, of rock and roll.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's like, I mean, Little Richard was amazing,
Oh yeah.
and James Brown. Uh, you know, it was interesting. It's like, it's like in junior high school, I was already beginning to come to terms with myself being gay,
Okay.
and knowing I'm a bit different, than my other friends, but like, because you're noticing your same sex attraction is occurring, and
Right.
it's like,
Right.
so I noticed there were two boys in the school who were very big Supremes fans,
Okay.
and that's how I could tell they were gay.
I love that. That's funny. That's funny. Well, they were an amazing group. I mean, Motown was just happening back then, wasn't it? In the late 50s.
Motown was just happening, and I mean, people like Stevie Wonder and were kind of more exciting than to me than the Supremes, so to say, so to speak, and not and but back then you were exposed to everybody who had hit records,
Right. Sure.
because of whether we talk about the variety TV shows,
Right. Right.
so so that so you weren't, even though you might be gravitating to one style of music more than the other, you were hearing all of it,
Yeah. I'm sure.
not like
Right.
today where people are very pigeonholed to like, I only listen to EDM, or I only listen to this, or
Right. Right. And attention span is very short. Anybody now listening, a younger generation, attention span is pretty quick to go to the next song or whatever. But that's the way it was. Now, did you go to any concerts in high school at these places in Brooklyn?
well, my first concert I went to was back in the day. Concerts were like in movie theaters, and the main movie theaters in Brooklyn and Manhattan, they would have like, the first show I think I saw was Murray Decay
Oh, how
at the
about
Brooklyn
that?
Fox movie theater, and on the bill were the Shirelles,
Wow.
uh, Little Richard,
Oh, that
and
must have been something.
that was when Jimi Hendrix was still on in Little Richard's band playing guitar.
Oh, wow. You saw him in Little Richard's band?
I
That's
saw him
something.
in Little, yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's
and
something.
I still have the program,
Oh
which
my
is like a
gosh.
25
Right.
page program with pictures of all the bands and little bios and whatever. Maybe we'll do an insert of what that looked like to this YouTube, if you're up for that.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. That's
But
amazing.
so I mean, it was really great to see all those people live, and they would come on, and I think the band was King Curtis, who I believe
Okay.
was a saxophone player back in the day.
Right.
And so all of the bands would have the same orchestra, you know.
Oh, okay.
and and they would, you know, and people like Little Richard had his own band fronting the orchestra, you know, so it was
Right.
interplayed between the group's band and whatever. And I remember at that one of those first shows I went to, this group called the Hullabaloos
Never heard
were
of him.
on. I know they were terrible,
How
and you
about
know,
that?
so you know, a lot of people they were like, you know, at the theater, you know, to see the show and the movie, whatever the movie was, like a beach blanket, you know, a beach blanket movie or whatever with Frankie Avalon
Oh yeah.
and Annette Funicello and whatever, and so you'd see the movie and the band would come on. You know, Murray DeKay would come out and rile up the crowd, get them excited and all that, and introduce all the groups.
Was everybody sitting at those shows? Were they standing and clapping and excited in at those kind of? Or everybody just sit and watch?
It was mostly young people. So
Oh, okay.
you know, you know, we were kind of a bit wild and rambunctious,
Yeah, I
so to
can't
speak.
imagine anybody sitting when Little Richard played. I mean,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. I can't remember what my reaction was, but I know I loved it, and I also loved his theatricality.
Oh,
Uh,
imagine.
he was very theatrical on
Oh, he
stage,
was.
and what was interesting, his stage performance was very similar to James Brown.
How about that? I
You
would
know,
think so.
both of them being super prima donnas and like, you know, royalty, and they would throw their 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 element of being royal on stage with, you
Right.
know, in terms of coming out with a cape on
Yeah.
and being cared for by someone, kind of like Morris Day from The Time,
Oh, yeah. That's right.
where, you know, like in Purple Rain, where he has this guy holding up a mirror for him
Oh,
just so he could
yeah.
see
That's
how
right.
gorgeous he is.
Well,
So
I think
Little Richard would do that, and James Brown would do a similar thing. And I don't know who copied who, but like it was a very similar stage show.
well, Prince kind of went that next direction too. I mean, he had that kind of element to him. You know,
I,
he's amazing what he did.
I never thought, you know, Prince is copying James Brown or Little Richard, but you're right.
It was close, you know, the way he had that stage presence, the band in the back, and all the moves. I mean, he had some amazing dance moves too. So
Yeah.
it's all copying somebody else, the next generation. But I don't know if we have that now, you know, like what we did. It just, you lived through like the a really great era of rock and roll. And then
Yeah.
how
I
did
mean,
you, so go ahead.
so I remember the second show I went to was in Manhattan, and it was Soupy Sales
Oh my gosh.
doing doing a whole review with similar thing with having a bunch of bands performing or whatever. I still have the program from the Soupy Sales shows as well,
How
which
about
is
that? I used to like
yeah
that show.
yeah
Yeah, he was good.
yeah. And for the summer, my parents, you know, since we didn't have a lot of money, we would vacation in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Oh, that's funny.
Just take the bus there. And I don't know if you know of the Steel Pier.
Oh, of course.
So the Steel Pier, they had a ballroom, and
Oh,
every year there was a set of attractions for the summer. And I remember seeing the Ventures
oh, how
there,
about that? Yeah,
you know,
I
which was
forgot about. That's when like Atlantic City was it going on the downside at that point? I guess before gambling, right? It was getting a little
it was way before gambling,
right,
and you know, but it was still a popular place to go, and the Steel Pier was famous worldwide because
right. Of course.
you know, so seeing bands in that ballroom, and it's like, you know, I have a program from that as well, which is amazing.
Wow.
I still have it, and I know exactly where it is in my apartment and all that. And so anyway, the so that gave me exposure to even more live music.
Right.
Uh, my parents didn't like me going out to to the Soupy Sales or Murray Decay shows at the theaters because they were worried about early teenage boy doing that. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
you know, but I didn't have no compunction whatsoever about it. But so yeah, so you know, and all this time I was studying violin and playing in the orchestras,
How about
and
that?
by the time I got to junior high school, I was first chair, or what they call concert master,
Wow.
which
I,
means
I never,
you're sitting right next to the conductor,
oh, right, right. Wow.
who
You
is
know,
one of the
I
teachers.
never knew you were a musician. This is really
I didn't
fascinating.
either.
There you go. It's really fascinating. Well, keep going. This is great. So you're in the orchestra and now is this leading up into high school or are you already in high school?
Well, I was in the orchestras from the third to the sixth grade,
Okay.
and then when I went to junior high school, which is seventh grade through ninth grade in New York, it's different in different parts of the country.
Right.
But so since I had 3 years of experience being in orchestras before junior high, I became first chair, what they call concert
Right.
master, which would mean everybody would tune their instruments to my A string.
Oh,
So I'd
okay.
play the A, and then all the first chair violinists, which were about 16,
Right.
would tune to my A, and then the second violins, another 15, 16
Right.
players would tune, then the violas, then the cellos,
Wow. Huh.
and then the I was in the string group, but there was also uh, the horn section, which is total separate from the string orchestra.
Right.
So 7-1, 8-1, 9-1 was all the horn sections, and
Mm.
classes 7-2, 8-2, 9-2, which I was in, was all string players.
Oh, okay.
So the entire class, everyone in my class was playing a string instrument.
How about
And
that? Wow.
yeah.
That's a
So
lot of
also
people.
a lot of people, yeah.
Wow.
And so I would go to school early before the first class, and it was my job, I wasn't paid, but it was my
Right.
job to tune all the string instruments.
Oh, about that.
So every morning I would tune about 30 violins,
Oh my
6
gosh.
violas,
Right.
4 cellos, and 2 bass fiddles. And you know, which I wasn't thinking of it at the time, but that gave me an incredible ear.
Imagine. Well, you must have some kind of perfect pitch to be able to tune all that, know the right tuning.
Yeah, and
You
well,
must,
it was a challenge, but
I'm
at the
sure.
same time, it was training that I wasn't knowing I was getting by the
Right.
process of doing it all. So and then I was also singing and the head of the chorus
Mm.
department, they wanted me to join the chorus, and I said I don't have time for that.
Right, right. That's funny.
you know
Yeah.
so so I would only do special singing chores, like I joined what was a barbershop quartet for in the eighth grade,
Right.
which is whatever that really was, singing light Italian opera,
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
and then also we each year we did the school musical,
Hmm.
and also in the eighth grade I got cast to the role to play Oliver in the school musical,
Mm.
singing where is love, food,
Oh,
glorious
right,
food,
right.
and all of those
That is
amazing songs.
fantastic. Wow. So
Yeah,
you've got some training that's how you developed such an ear for music. You've been doing it for so long, even as a kid.
I didn't really, yeah, as I said, it's like I didn't see it necessarily as training, but I was saw it as fun and interesting. And it was also, since I was so immersed in the school orchestra system, that I was able to skip any class I wanted to skip. So I didn't really
Oh,
get a
okay.
proper education.
Oh boy. So what kind of what were you doing? Bach, Beethoven? What were some of the classical songs you were playing?
Handel, Bach,
No?
Beethoven, Tchaikovsky.
Oh, okay.
Uh, school orchestras, it's more not necessarily pop classical music, but more mainstream,
Right.
you know, but I mean, I started listening to people like Paul Hindemith and Stravinsky,
Oh yeah.
uh, because to me it's like I was already going out of the mainstream, you know. So listening to Stockhausen
Oh yeah.
and people like that was like like early punk,
Oh yeah.
you
The
know.
Rite of Spring. I mean, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff is really ahead of its time. So did you continue this in high school too? So what
I
did you do?
continued. I could went straight through high school, and and also one of my best friends uh, who lived about 10 blocks away from where I lived, but he lived 6 blocks from the junior high school that I went to.
Okay.
Uh, we leave school and then we'd go get a Coke or a chocolate soda or whatever, and then go to his house and jam for about 2 hours.
Oh wow. Hmm.
And he was in one of the 7/1, 8/1, 9/1 horn sections, and he played oboe.
How
Uh,
about that? Huh.
but so I would be on violin, him on oboe. We jammed for like 2 hours, but he could play just about every wind instrument.
Hmm.
So he played mostly oboe and English horn and various saxophones. And I would play violin, I would play viola, and I'd also play guitar with him.
Oh
And we would
wow.
just jam for a couple hours every day after school.
So that's how you learn and keep going, I guess, when you jam with people like that. That's an interesting instrument, oboe. That's
Yeah.
great sound. That and clarinet, I think, are both really have very nice sounds to them.
Well, I loved what he could do, and it was interesting. In the senior year of junior high school, we competed for the top honor for best musician in the school,
Yeah.
and so me and Jim Ferriola and I competed against each other in a way,
Oh
in a polite
wow.
way, and he won the golden eighth note, which was the award.
How about that? That's wow. That's unusual.
And
Go.
I tied for second for being the best string player, but I didn't
Wow.
get the golden eighth note. But Jim definitely deserved it. Jim went on to play in orchestras professionally,
How about that? So, did you continue on in high school in the orchestra? Did you continue music?
straight through senior
How
year.
about that? That is really something.
Yeah,
Wow. I never knew that about you, Bill. That's really fascinating. Now I know how you had developed such a great ear. Now, do you ever still play at all anymore, or is it just gave up on the violin once you got into college? Or
I don't own a violin anymore, uh,
wow,
but I have two guitars and I have keyboards, and
right.
I still write some music. And I was not really that much into music composition, but I still have some cassette tapes of me and Jim playing together,
Oh wow,
which
wow.
I'm hesitant to pull out of the woodwork to and throw them into a deck.
Yeah,
Uh, One, like oh my God, I hope we didn't sound too terrible, and the other thing is like hopefully the tape hasn't fallen apart and
right.
deteriorated.
Well, you're lucky you had music in your life as a kid with your parents. My parents really weren't that musical. My father was in the glee club in college. He was a singer, like a high
Right.
soprano, but he never pursued it after college, and there was not much music around. I had to do it myself. To, and I think it was the Beatles that really got me going when I was a kid. Seeing A Hard Day's Night, the movie, that was, I think, did it. And the Ed Sullivan Show
Yeah.
really did it. So, but
That was an exciting event.
oh, it really was. Changed a lot of things. It
It
really
changed a
brought in.
lot of things, it opened up the concept of what music could be like, and can be a bit rebellious.
Right. But you had the rebellious guys in the 50s, though, that influenced them. So it was a whole process. We really started rock and roll here.
Yeah.
And
Who do you think were the rebellious in the 50s?
I would say Little Richard, uh, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Jerry Lee Lewis. I mean, those guys were like, I don't know who else, I'm trying to think of who else would be in that category. I'm sure Buddy Holly a little bit, maybe not as much, but he was in there too in that category. But Little
Yeah.
Richard was and Jerry Lee Lewis were just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think.
The one group from the era that I couldn't stand were the Beach Boys.
Oh,
Even though I knew
neither.
all their songs, and because not only did you have exposure through the Ed Sullivan and other variety shows,
Right.
uh, uh, we also, like, when we went to lunch, we often went to a place, a pizzeria,
Okay.
to get couple of slices of pizza when school lunch break,
Right.
and because food in the schools was terrible, the school
Oh,
cafeterias.
it always was at ours. You know what's crazy about my school,
So
high
they had
school?
jukeboxes in the pizzerias, so you would hear everyone.
Now, was there smoking in your high school at all? Was there smoking outside allowed? Like outside before school or after school?
I think it was a little bit. I don't think kids smoked that much, when I
Well,
was younger.
we had a smoking break in my high school.
Really?
So, in
Yeah.
the morning and the afternoon, you could go outside and smoke. And
You
this
were a
was
lot more progressive than my
I
years.
guess in New Jersey, I don't know, but every time I tell that story, nobody can believe it. But I guess those were the days of that.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, toward the late high school years, I started, me and my brother playing guitar, and all of our friends playing guitar. So
right,
we would jam together, mostly rhythm guitar, as opposed to doing a lot of leads and stuff like that, because that was a whole other discipline to be
was
able to
was
play
was
lead.
Ed playing guitar with you too? He was a
Yep.
musician. How
Yep.
about that?
Yeah, we had our differences in terms of taste of music.
Right,
He became much more into Santana and Jefferson Airplane. I was
right.
more into Beatles and Spanky and Our Gang,
Oh
and
yeah,
Janis Joplin, and so there was a real delineation between our tastes in music, even from early on,
mm.
where I played every sport, but my brother was more into playing league sport.
Oh, how about that?
So he was on championship little league teams, and I
How
was
about
just
that?
playing after school in the street.
So he was in baseball, a baseball player, good baseball player.
Yeah, competitive.
How about that?
Competitive, yeah. I
That's
mean,
something.
one of his teams won a championship one year, and it's like,
Well, we had a lot of deadheads in our school. I mean, we had some very dedicated Grateful Dead students that would listen to tapes and live shows and anything they could get their hands on. It was quite a phenomenon
yeah,
at
yeah,
that point. So
yeah.
that's what happened there. So I guess we could take a break here now on this segment. I think the next part two, we should go into your time with 9/9, with the dance music, all that. I mean, there's so much to talk about with all the amazing artists you've seen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we could explore some of the music I was
I would
listening
love to
to
hear
in
that.
the early '70s, and then how that led into my DJing and working with my
Oh,
brother.
absolutely. And what were some of the bands you liked in the 70s before we cut this first segment out?
Well, the what's interesting is that the groups we were listening to in the '60s became corporate rock and roll,
Right,
where it was all for the money, as opposed to, like, exploring new rock and roll, and what that could mean.
right.
So anyway, so we grew to have a distaste for what music was coming out of, Rod Stewart, and the Stones, and some of the Beatles stuff and whatever, that we had to turn to alternatives, or I did, me and my friends,
right.
and seeking out people like the Canterbury bands, which we'll get into talking
Oh,
about
well,
in
yeah,
the
I'm
next thing,
hoping, as I told,
and progressive jazz.
I told you off camera, I'm still hoping to speak to Richard Sinclair, who was
That's fantastic.
one of my idols. That whole era, that Canterbury era, was just, I got turned onto it in actually college. I found a couple of their records, and in Soft Machine and Hatfield in the North, and it was just.
How did you discover them?
I was at a $1.99 bin cutout at a store in New Brunswick. There was a store there that had a lot of cutouts that they would sell, and that's how I discovered all those bands. And so it was fantastic, the music that was coming out of that whole scene of Canterbury.
Yeah, so it was a much needed new type of music from what rock and roll had been, and then
Right.
sung to in the early 70s,
Right.
and then avant-garde jazz also played a huge role in my music in the at that time period as well. And so it's interesting how people like Anthony Braxton and Miles Davis and Chick Corea and Keith Jarrett blended into my life along with Hatfield in the North.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah,
I was so pleasantly surprised when you told me you knew you liked those bands, because they were on top of my list. I still have the records, the two records since
three,
school.
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm really gonna see what happens, because I could link up with him.
So if you want, I'm not holding you to it. I'd be happy to co-host with that.
Sure. Okay.
You know, because I'd be very curious to hear what he has to say, as well as, you know.
He's a very nice chap. I mean, very nice
I'm
fellow.
sure.
I got to speak to him briefly through Facebook, this messenger service with the phone, but he couldn't connect his video for some reason. He's got somebody coming over maybe next week to figure out what's wrong with his computer.
Work that out. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it. Let's see if I can get a three-way talk. That'd be great.
Yeah, because you know, I mean, it's all of those bands were a day-to-day, everyday part of my life.
How about that?
I imagine they were with you as well.
Right. That'd be great. Well, Bill, this has been great. I want to thank you for coming on. I know it's been a while before we linked up here, but thank you for doing this. And I'm looking forward to part 2 here when you get the time, and we could talk about the phase you had with dance music, 99 Records, and a whole lot more. But boy, there was a lot here at the start.
Yeah, and I hope your viewers and listeners will be excited to want to check out a part 2.
I hope so. I think they will. So anyway, that's it for now. Bill, thank you again, and we'll be talking soon. Take care now.
Thank you, Dennis. Love you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.